This is 757 Saturday Sports Talk with Matt Hatfield and Coach Ed Young on ESPN Radio 94.1.
Back here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on ESPN Radio 94.1 with the Coach Ed Young. I am Matt Hatfield. We're pleased to be joined by one of the best in the business covering all things sports, whether it's college football, golf, tennis, and a little bit of everything in between. You can follow him on Twitter at Chuck Culpepper1. He's with the Washington Post. We say hello to our good friend Chuck Culpepper here on ESPN Radio 94.1. I believe your travels have taken you to Marshall today, right?
Yes, that's right. Good morning. Good late morning.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and it's a very unique day there with Marshall having the 50th anniversary of the plane crash commemoration of honoring each of those students who perished in the crash there. And their football team rather quietly kept undefeated. They got a local standout from our area here in Tavante Beckett, who's one of the top candidates for Defensive Player of the Year in Conference USA, and a pretty good team.
Yeah, and one of those cases also where a team maybe can get a little more recognition because of the nature of the season than it might in a regular season, but we all wish that weren't true. So there's that whole mix of feelings there. Sure.
Now, my co-host here is a big Notre Dame fan. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were at the Notre Dame-Clemson game last week?
Yes, I was.
Tell me about it. How great of a ball game was that?
It was crazy. It wouldn't stop. I'm surprised it went only 2 overtime because it started to take on the feel of going 6 or 7. It just, and from a moment sort of in the fourth quarter where you thought maybe Clemson had it settled, and then Notre Dame got that 53-yard pass, I think it was, which was the kind of play that we've grown accustomed to Clemson not giving up that kind of thing. But so it was pretty loud for 11,000 people, and of course then they ran onto the field, which we've all been talking about ever since. But I think they'll play again, and we'll see what happens then.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chuck, Ed Young here. Being a big Notre Dame fan that I am, I actually was getting ready to turn it off when Booker fumbled into the end zone. I thought, okay, that's the game. Yeah. But obviously I got educated, and you stick it to the very end. The celebration at the end was absolutely crazy because the first thing I thought was, oh, my God, CDC and everybody's going to go berserk, COVID running rampant. But I guess them young people really just didn't care at that moment. You had that in your story on there. The big thing is, can they, this season itself in general, what do you feel we're going to finish the college football season? Is it going to get worse here in the state of Virginia? The governor has put on the restrictions now, back down to 25 people for attendance starting Monday. So what's your feeling on that?
I think the season probably will get done, but I'm not going to be shocked if it gets called off at some point, because the forecasts for the late fall and winter in the United States are so ominous that we're starting to reach a point where, I think I've pretty much all along thought they'd get all the way to their, conference championship games December 19th in the case of the SEC and a lot of the others. I think I've always just had in my head, they'll make it there. But the last 2 weeks with the 10 cancellations and postponements last week and 15 the last time I checked this week, could be more because I haven't checked it in a few hours. But that started to make me think, okay, if this thing went off the rails completely and got stopped, it would not be a big shock.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. We're talking with Chuck Culpepper of the Washington Post here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on ESPN Radio 94.1. And I think pretty much a lot of the focus is, certainly you're seeing some of these neat stories like Marshall and Coastal Carolina. And how about Liberty here in our state knocking off Virginia Tech a week ago? It's pretty much those stories and then the playoff. Can we get to a college football playoff? And pretty much the feeling is you're going to have Ohio State, you're going to have Alabama, and maybe the ACC gets those two teams in it again in Clemson, Notre Dame. Is that kind of your gut feeling right now, or do you see a team emerging outside of those main four?
I think everyone expects the first three you mentioned. Even though Clemson lost, I think everyone expects them to, I don't know, we've kind of grown accustomed to them winning out. And so I think everyone all along this year has looked at Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State as being, almost penciled, back when people used to use pencils, penciled into the playoff. Could be fun to have a Cincinnati, in there. But I kind of think that it's going to come down to two teams from the SEC or the ACC and Ohio State, and then one more team from the SEC. Two teams. Let's say two teams from the ACC, like you say, one from the SEC and Ohio State. I think it's a little bit of a problem in the sport over not COVID related here, but over the seasons how for a while there was Clemson, Alabama every year. And that was kind of fun. I think that kind of thing wears out, and I wonder if the sport's getting too regional for its own good. So it would be nice to have a Pac-12 in there, but boy, they're hobbling out there with their season. So I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, you just get the sense that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, this was almost doomed from the start, Chuck. I think we talked about this in early September. Like, once you got this late start, getting to a 5 or 6 game season almost seemed insurmountable, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And the one thing I've been saying to myself all along is don't evaluate anyone. No one's experienced this before. Everyone's on the fly here. No right or wrong way to do it. When they were canceled on August the 11th, it was out of reason and concern. When they were brought back, there was a certain reason in that, but they're really hamstrung by the fact that whenever their games are off for that week, they're canceled. They're not pushed to December 5th and 12th because they've already clogged up December 5th and 12th. So that's just the nature of it. It's not a travesty next to the tragedy that's going on, but that's the way it is.
In our last couple minutes with you, and we really appreciate you making time for us, I want to hit on the golf here. It's November 14th, and it's Masters weekend, and it's supposed to crank up to 78 tomorrow in Augusta. So it's 2020, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be that 78. I guess you could say 78 degrees in Georgia in November is not outlandish, right? So yeah, that makes sense.
In the 84-year history of the Masters, no golfer has ever broken 70 in all 4 rounds, a record that, it could possibly, I don't know how closely you're following the leaderboard here with, the likes of Jon Rahm and Dustin Johnson, Cameron Smith, Justin Thomas right here, and a couple of these individuals I've referenced here, such as Thomas being one of them, I know Rahm being another, they've both hit under 70 through 2 rounds. Could a record like that fall, and would that also be so 2020 if it did this year?
I think that might be a reflection, yes, and I think it might be a reflection of, I think we've kind of been waiting for that record to fall anyway, in the sense of the way these guys are mauling golf courses now. I know Augusta National presents its own set of challenges and always will, but I've been, you sort of think that to me, if somebody did that this week, would fall in line with sort of the trends of the game now and how it's going. Macro, over the years, even more than 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck, before it all started, I threw a dart at the board and it said Dustin Johnson, and I was informed that he is tied for first. So my pick is good. Do you think maybe he may falter or somebody from the middle of the pack? That's question 1. And number 2, what about, of course, everybody wants to know, Tiger Woods?
Dustin Johnson, I like your pick there, and I like this aspect of it. In contention so many times, so many majors, got the one title, the 16 U.S. Open, and I think I always like to see with a player of that caliber, the majors to somehow line up as well. They don't always. Colin Montgomery was a great player, never won one major. You can think of other players in that category. I think DJ is a more than one major caliber of talent and of capability and of heart and head and all of it. So, he's had some bad breaks. He's ruined it sometimes himself in the majors he hasn't won. But for him to win another and for it not to be a U.S. Open so that it's a variety, I think he's got the kind of game that's big enough where I think a variety of majors and plural majors would be very fitting in his case. So I'm really kind of just hoping objectively that works out. I think it's justice if it does. And Woods, I'd really like to know, just nuances, what it is that makes him understand that course so well. And I'm fascinated by how he works his way through it and how he knows it so well, and what are the things about it that that kind of make him understand it as well as he does. I think that's what's really interesting about watching him. I haven't expected him to win this whole time, but that's another one of those cases. If he did, okay, you wouldn't be completely stunned.
And the reigning Masters champ is just 4 off the lead as we approach noon Eastern here. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for some time this morning. We wish you all the best, safe travels there, and enjoy the game in Marshall. And we'll keep in touch, all right?
Thanks a lot for having me.